So this Shabbos is Shabbos Zohar, and this Shabbos we will read Parsha Zohar. So today we will be discussing Zohar as Asher Osa Lecho Amalek, the mitzvah of Zechiras Masei Amalek. And as my custom, first we will discuss Shoroshei mitzvah, the fundamentals of the mitzvah D'Oraisa, and towards the end of this year we also will discuss various different questions and dilemmas, halacha lamaisa. So what is essentially the mitzvah of Zechiras Masei Amalek? Two fundamentally different approaches in the Rishonim. Toises Brochus Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. In the Gemara we find the Machlokes Kol HaTorah Kula B'Loshan HaKodesh Nemro or B'Kol Loshoy Nemro. And Rashi and Megillah writes, L'maynav Kemena L'Kriyas HaTorah. Toises asks, Kriyas HaTorah is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So what is the nafka min HaTorah? Whether the Torah is B'Loshan HaKodesh or B'Kol Loshoy. Toises says, B'Kriya D'Oraisa, Kamo Parsha Zohar. So obviously, Toises' opinion is clear. The mitzvah D'Oraisa is to read the Parsha in Torah. That is the mitzvah D'Oraisa. Toises writes, Kemoi Parsha Zohar, indicating it's not only Parsha Zohar, there must be something else like Parsha Zohar. The Shulchan Aruch twice paskins that Kriyas Parsha Zohar and Parshas Porah are both Midioraisa, Kuf Mem Vav Siv Beis. Shulchan Aruch brings various different opinions. When they lane in shul, could the individual learn? Could he say Shnai Mikro V'Echad Targum? And then the Shulchan Aruch says, that is only all the other Kriyas throughout the year. But Parshas Porah, Parshas Zohar, Torah, you need to listen. Dov Reish Pei Siv Zayin. In additional halacha, all the year, a person that lives in a little town, he has no Kriyas HaTorah, has no Kriyas HaTorah. But Parshas Porah, Parshas Zohar, Torah, he needs to leave his house and be a guest somewhere else. He shouldn't miss the Kriya because these are Kriyas Torah. So the Beis Yosef and Shulchan Aruch follows in the footsteps of Toises. The mitzvah D'Oraisa is to listen, to hear or read the Parsha Sheb'Torah. But the Beis Yosef quotes Toises also Parshas Porah. In our Toises, Kemoi Parsha Zohar. Shas Verumaisa, which was before Shas Velna, the Gerson Toises as Parshas Porah and Parshas Zohar. And we also find that in Toises Shas, Toises Rabbeinu Peretz. But Toises doesn't say that reading the Parsha in shul with a minyan is min HaTorah. All we find in Toises is that the mitzvah D'Oraisa is reading the Parsha, and therefore it's an afkamona the Kol HaTorah Kulo B'Loshan HaKodesh Nemra B'Kol Loshan. Where does the Beis Yosef see in Toises the Shulchan Aruch that reading this Parsha in Shabbos is min HaTorah? That is based on the Rosh, even though the Beis Yosef doesn't quote the Rosh. Perek Zayin, Simen Chaf, Rosh, Masechet Broches, based on the Gemara, Mem Zayin Amid Beis, Pa'amachas Nechnes Reb Eliezer Bebeis HaKnesses, and he doesn't find a minyan. There were 9 people. Shichrer Avdoi, he freed his slave to be Mitzaref Laminyan. There's a word said, quoted by the Baal Shem Tov, that's what Hasidim say, wherever there's 9, there's going to be a tzenta. But by Reb Eliezer it didn't work. He had 9, he didn't have a 10th. So he freed his Eved. And the Gemara asks, Lo element avoidi, Mishachar Avdoi Oiver Ba'asei, Letzorech Mitzvah Muta, Mitzvah Bubavera, Mitzvah Derabim. Says the Rosh, from this Gemara we could prove even a Mitzvah Derabanan would permit freeing a slave. Doichek Loima, that it was Shabbos Zohar. So what we can learn from the Rosh is Shabbos Zohar, 10 people for Kriyas HaTorah is min HaTorah. And that is obviously what the Shulchan Aruch paskins in the 2 different sources that I quoted. But the question is, why? How? How do we understand that the mitzvah D'Oraisa Zohar as Asher Osa Lecho Amalek necessitates Kriyas HaTorah with a minyan? Nowhere do we find B'chlal min HaTorah there's a need for a minyan. 2 different interpretations in the Achrayim, and both are very difficult for me to accept. The Keren Oyer and Brochas Daf Hey says Iskash zechira lemachia. And just like Mechias Amalek is a mitzvah al hatzibur, Schiras Masei Amalek is also a mitzvah al hatzibur. Why is this so difficult for me to accept? First of all, we don't find Iskash zechira lemachia, and why would zechira be dependent on machia? But the bigger question is, Mechias Amalek, that is upon the tzibur, is a totally different concept of tzibur than Schiras Masei Amalek al tzibur. When we say Schiras Masei Amalek is mutla al tzibur, tzibur means 10 people, a minyan. Wherever there's a minyan, they have the mitzvah. This is the way to perform the mitzvah. So like Schiras Masei Amalek, tzibur means 10 people, odem asoro, a minyan. Mechias Amalek mutla al tzibur is upon the nation, the Jewish people, headed by Melech HaMoshiach. It's a different concept of tzibur b'chlal, and therefore, Hadre Kusha Leduchte, Pu'ura Socher. Pu'ura Socher was a Talmud of the Gaon. He compiled the Maaseh Rav Min Hogei Agro Kuf Lamed Gimel. The Pu'ura Socher says, because Chazal say, Ein Shmoi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sholem ve'ein Kisei Sholem ad Shi'amocha Zecha Amalek. Because the Pasuk in Parshas B'Shalach says, Ki Yod Al Keis Yom Melchom Al Hashem Ba'Amalek. Keis instead of Kisei. Yud Kei instead of Shem Havaya. Ein Shmoi Sholem, ve'ein Kisei Sholem ad Shi'amocha Zecha Amalek. And therefore, Schiras Masei Amalek is like a Dover Shebekdusha, and Dover Shebekdusha needs a sorrow. Well, gewaltige Chiddush. In Pashtus, Dover Shebekdusha is only when we recite and mention and verbalize Kedushas Hashem, Nadishach v'naritzach, Nikadesh Shimcho. Kodosh, Kodosh, Kodosh. That's a Dover Shebekdusha. Yizgadel v'yizkadesh Shemei Rabo. The fact that Ein Shmoi Sholem, that doesn't make it a Dover Shebekdusha. Even in Italia, my fundamental understanding would be, everybody agrees that the mitzvah d'oraisa does not necessitate a minyan. All the Rosh means to say. Yes, the Rosh agrees with Tosfos. The mitzvah d'oraisa is not everybody saying whatever he wants in the way he wants. You need to read the Parsha Shabbat Torah. But in Torah, you definitely don't need a minyan. You don't need a kosher sefer Torah. You don't need Shabbos Zachar. All the Rosh means to say. Even a mitzvah d'Rabbanan she'ein lo ikar min haTorah overrides the Isser of Shichar Avodim. If we would say that the soil was Shabbos Zachar, ein lano elo mitzvah sheyesh lo ikar min haTorah. And in very many sources, a mitzvah d'Rabbanan sheyesh lo ikar min haTorah has a higher level of chumrah than ein lo ikar min haTorah. So I think the same regarding the Shulchan Aruch. When the Shulchan Aruch says, Parshas Porah, Parshas Zocher is medioraisa, fundamentally it's dioraisa. Doesn't mean to say that Torah tzorach likroi bebeis hakneses b'sorah miyisor. And why am I so convinced that this pshat is right? Because nobody could explain, and nobody could even argue that the mitzvah Torah is dafka Shabbos shelefnei Purim b'Parshas Zocher. So why did Rebbe Eliezer need to free a slave? Let him wait for another opportunity. And I'll read in the Torah, Parshas Kiteitze. We anyway read the Parsha of Amalek. So why did it need to be Meshachar David for this Shabbos b'Parshas Zocher? And therefore my feeling is, all the Rosh means to say, if it would be Parshas Zocher, it would be Yesh lo ikar min haTorah. Kach ne'lani yazdaita. So the Rosh, Tosfos, and the Shulchan Aruch on the same page. The mitzvah d'oraisa is to read the Parsha, the story of Amalek and Parshas Kiteitze. But in the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Chinuch, they have a totally different approach. And according to them, Zochras HaShos Lech Amalek is like Zochras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshoy. Lo yimar devorim sheyesh bem kedushas hayoim l'gabei Shabbos, the same l'gabei Masei Amalek. Everybody in his own style, his own formula, in his own words, relate the story of Amalek. That is the mitzvah d'oraisa. That's clear in the Rambam. Mitzvah to say Kuf Peites, Hilchas Malachim Perekei Aloha Hei. The Rambam writes we need to tell the story, and we will further discuss the Rambam just in a few minutes. Neither the Rambam nor the Chinuch say we need to read the Parsha. The Ramban and Parshas Kiteitzei offers two different approaches. And the Ramban is Mesupik. Maybe the mitzvah is to read the Parsha. Nere be'enai ikar, writes the Ramban, that it's not reading the Parsha. Everybody in his own way, with his own words, tell the story of Amalek. So many Rishonim, their approach is like Zohar Shem Shabbos L'Kasher, like Berchas Hamazon and Berchas HaTorah, like Tefillah. Tefillah, according to the Rambam, is a mitzvah d'oraisa, Perek Aleph Haloch Aleph Mitfillah. But what to daven, and which words to choose, Min HaTorah, everybody has his own liberty. The same Berchas Hamazon, the same Berchas HaTorah, the same would apply to Schiras Masei Amalek. Now the second question is, what do we have to tell? Which story? What? What is the essence of Schiras Masei Amalek? Machlokes Mogen Avraham and Mishnah Berurah. Mogen Avraham Tov Reish Pei Hei, quoting the Trumas Hadeshen. Trumas Hadeshen Siman Kuf Chav. Masei Shahoyu. Person lives in a little town, and he lives amongst Goyim. He has neither Kriyas Torah nor Mikra Megillah. He doesn't have a minyan in his town. And Shabbos Zohar approaches. He has one of two options. He could travel right. He's going to make it to another Kehillah for Shabbos. He's going to hear Parshat Zohar, but he needs to leave after Shabbos. Purim is going to be in the middle of the way. He won't hear the Megillah. He could travel left. If he goes the other direction, he's going to get there by Purim. He's going to hear the Megillah. But Shabbos, he's going to be in the middle of the way and miss Parshat Zohar. Which is the more important? Trumas Hadeshen says, Shabbos Zohar is Min HaTorah. Megillah is only Medivra Kabbalah. It's a Derabanan. So it's preferable that he makes it for Shabbos, even though he'll miss the Megillah. According to my interpretation that I said just a few minutes ago, it's a Gavaldige Chiddush, because in my understanding, there is no mitzvah d'oraisa to hear Parshat Zohar in shul with a minyan this Shabbos. So the question would be, the Rabbanu sheyesh lo ikar min HaTorah? Does it override Divrei Kabbalah she'ein lo ikar min HaTorah? And that's a fascinating question. Because Divrei Kabbalah chamurim and Divrei Seifrim. The Rabbanu sheyesh lo ikar min HaTorah chamur and the Rabbanu she'ein lo ikar min HaTorah. So how do we compare Divrei Kabbalah she'ein lo ikar min HaTorah, Divrei Seifrim sheyesh lo ikar min HaTorah? That is the dilemma. Going to listen Parshat Zohar is the Rabbanu sheyesh lo ikar min HaTorah. Megillah is Divrei Kabbalah. So the Trumas Hadeshen and the Shlos say, preferable Shabbos Zohar. The Mogen Avraham disagrees, because the Mogen Avraham argues, if he's going to go left, Purim in the morning, Kriyas Torah, is another Parsha of Amalek B'Shalach. V'yaveh Amalek v'yalocha b'misul b'rafidim. And he could be Yaitzu with that Parsha as well. So if he goes left, he's going to miss Shabbos. But Purim, it'll be Mekayim both mitzvahs. Schiras Masei Amalek in the morning, B'Kriyas Torah, and Mikra Megillah. Mishnah Berurah disagrees with the Mogen Avraham. Sif Kotten Tez Zayin, and the Mishnah Berurah argues no. The Ikka mitzvah of Schiras Masei Amalek, what do we have to remember? We have to remember that we have to destroy Amalek. We have to remember the mitzvah of Timcha Zecher Amalek. That mitzvah appears only in Kiteitzei. It does not appear in Parshas B'Shalach. And therefore, the Kriyas HaTorah Purim in the morning, you're not Mekayim the mitzvah of Schiras Masei Amalek. So actually we have a Machlokes Mogen Avraham and Mishnah Berurah. What do we need to remember? According to the Mishnah Berurah, the mitzvah of Timcha Zecher Amalek Metachas HaShomayim. That is what we need to remember. According to Mogen Avraham, no. The story of Amalek. His treachery, his riches, his evil spirit, and what he did to us. He was the first to try to annihilate and destroy Klal Yisrael. Not necessarily the mitzvah of Timcha Zecher Amalek. And I think the Machlokes Mogen Avraham, Mishnah Berurah, is after Machlokes Rambam and Ramban. So let me once again remind you, according to the Rambam and Ramban, you don't even need to read a parasha. Everybody could formulate the story in his own words, but nevertheless, I think they do have a Machlokes. Is it all about mitzvahs machia or telling the story? Rambam Kuf Pei Tes. And I am quoting the Lashon of the Rambam. So the Rambam writes, "Shetzivonu liskor ma she'oselonu Amalek, v'na'orer hanefoshes b'mamorim lehilochem boi." We should encourage people with our words to fight them. That is clearly the way I explained the Mishnah Berurah. La'orer hanefoshes b'mamorim lehilochem boi. We find similar in the Chinuch, but the Ramban, mitzvah say zayin sheshochach harambam. Mitzvah liskor Masei Amalek kedei lo da'at shelo lichinom yimcha Hashem zichroi ela mechemlosoi oleinu. We need to tell the story of Amalek to appreciate that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to destroy Amalek because he loves us. So the Ramban clearly says, what we need to remember is not our mitzvah timchazech al Amalek, but rather HaKadosh Baruch Hu's promise, ki mocha em chazech Amalek. And that is Dafkan Parshas B'Shalach and not in Parshas Ki Teitzei. So according to the Ramban, Parshas B'Shalach would even come before Parshas Ki Teitzei. And that is why my argument is, according to the Ramban and Chinuch, Kriyas Parshas Zohar in Shabbat Zohar has nothing to do with Schiras Masei Amalek. It's just a halacha in Kriyas HaTorah, just like Dalet Parshas, like Parshas Shkonim, Parshas Porah, Parshas HaChodesh. It's not associated at all with the mitzvah of Schiras Masei Amalek. Because according to the Ramban, if it would be to be Mekayim Schiras Masei Amalek, Chazal would choose Parshas B'Shalach, not Parshas Ki Teitzei. Because according to the Ramban, the essence of the mitzvah of Schiras Masei Amalek is to appreciate שהקדוש ברוך הוא ימחה זכר עמלק מחמלסוי עלינו. And therefore this kriya is just the din kriya satayr. So why are we so makbed in this kriya? Based on the Shulchan Aruch. Because the Shulchan Aruch in two different sources, as I quote it, clearly says, the kriya of Parsha Zohar is the way Chazal were metaken to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Schiras Masei Amalek. So there's a big discussion in the Achronim, and the only one of the Rishonim that deals with this question are women mechuyev in Schiras Masei Amalek. The only one is the Chinuch. And many Achronim deal with this question. And the Chinuch says women are exempt from the mitzvah Schiras Masei Amalek because only those that have a mitzvah of Timcha Zecher Amalek have the mitzvah of Zochar Asher Osa L'Chol Amalek. So obviously the Chinuch clearly feels like the Mishnah Berurah. The mitzvah to remember that ultimately we should fight Amalek and destroy him. And therefore, those that are not mechuyev to fight don't have a chiyuv to remember. Minchas Chinuch questions the Chinuch. How do we know that that's the mitzvah? So the Minchas Chinuch would fit in nicely with the Magen Avraham. So the Chinuch obviously follows in the Rambam's footsteps and Sefer HaMitzvahs like he usually does. Minchas Chinuch would be more similar to the Ramban. So now we have a steal in the Mishnah Berurah. What does the Mishnah Berurah feel about women? Parsha Zohar. Mishnah Berurah doesn't speak about this. However, Sefer HaMitzvahs Kotzah, that is, the Mishnah Berurah wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs. But everything the Mishnah Berurah wrote is only because he was so convinced that this is Tikkun Hador and Tzorech Hashah. He was totally devoted to the needs of Klal Yisrael. So one of the Svarim, one of the amazing Svarim of the Mishnah Berurah is Sefer Mitzvahs HaKotzah, and that is a compilation of the mitzvahs that say that are Noyeg Bizman Hazeh, because the Chavetz Chaim felt it is more important that everybody should familiarize himself with the details of the mitzvahs that are Noyeg Bizman Hazeh, rather than all the mitzvahs, most of them aren't Noyeg Bizman Hazeh. And a mitzvah Ayin Vav, the Mishnah Berurah writes, women are mechuyev in Schiras Masei Amalek because the mitzvah sheishen is mangrama. So he disagrees with the Chinuch. But the Mishnah Berurah says you're not yoitzu with Parshas B'Shalach because the mitzvah is to remember to fight. If the mitzvah is to remember to fight, then why would women have the mitzvah? Lani Dati. Even if we do maintain, like the Mishnah Berurah does, the mitzvah is to remember Tim Chazech al Amalek. But that does not necessarily mean that women that don't have the mitzvah of Mechia also don't have the mitzvah of Zechira. it is reasonable to argue everyone has to remember that someone will need to fight. And a husband will need to leave his wife and children and go out to war, not knowing whether he'll ever see his family again. He will need his wife's support. So the women need to remember the mitzvah of Tim Chazech al Amalek, to encourage their husbands to go and wage war. And the sisters will need to encourage their brothers. So it's no pella at all that everyone has the mitzvah of Zechira, even though not everyone, the women don't have the mitzvah of Mechia. And that is Miyashav, the Mishnah Berurah. The fundamental question, the women need to go to hear Parshat Zohar. In Yerushalayim, thousands of women flock to the shuls. But in Europe, before the Holocaust, in the vast majority of Kehilas, women never went to shul to hear Parshat Zohar. Shalosh Yeshuvas Toras Chesed, Reb Shneur Zalman, who was the Gadol in Lublin, Sof Yomav in Yerushalayim, Orach Chaim Siman Lamed Zayin, he says, we've never seen and never heard that women go to shul to hear Parshat Zohar. That is the opinion of Moiri Verabi, the great Kloisenberger Rebbe. Shalosh Yeshuvas Divrei Yatzav Orach Chaim Reish Pei Ches. So in Galicia and Poland, this minhag wasn't accepted. I saw a contest written by Rabbi Yosef Svidona quoting Rabbi Leo Sternbuch, testifying that he heard from the Chofetz Chaim's daughter that the Chofetz Chaim's children, the girls, his wife, did not go to shul to hear Parshat Zohar. It was not the minhag in Lithuania, not in Poland, not in Galicia, not in the Hasidic part of Hungary. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Talmud Ikra, quotes the same from the Chazon Ish. Women do not have a mitzvah hearing Parsha Zohar. I know that was the opinion of Reb Moshe Zatzal. So that's minhag Poland, Galicia, Hungary, Lithuania, Kaf HaChaim, quoting Lemudei Hashem. Women do not have a mitzvah to hear Parsha Zohar. So obviously that was Kehilot Asfaradim. Only the Yekim did have this minhag. Shalosh Yeshuvas Binyan Tzion, Rabbi Yankov Edliker, quotes his Rebbe, Rabbi Avrom Bing, that heard from Rabbi Nosson Adler in Frankfurt that women do need to hear Parsha Zohar. And obviously, that was the minhag of the Chassam Sofer. It's not in Shuvas Chassam Sofer, not in Kisvei Alocha of the Chassam Sofer, but in Droshes Chele Gimel. So obviously, the Yekim in Ashkenaz had this minhag. Reb Shilei Diskim and Reb Diskim Kulta Sachen Kuv Beis writes Nosham Archayev, and obviously that is why so many women in Yerushalayim go to shuls. But the vast majority of poskim, I think, Nosham are not chayev, and therefore I wonder why the Minchas Yitzchok Chelek Tes in Mesamaches writes Rava poskim maintain that women do need to hear Parsha Zohar, and in my opinion, Rava Poskim, none of the Poskim, besides the Binyan Tzion and Minhag Ashkenaz, all the sources I quoted, Nosham Poto. There might be Chayev in the mitzvah Diuraisa, but that doesn't mean they're Chayev in the Tikkun Chazal, go to shul and hear Parsha Zohar. I go beyond that. I think every Posik that doesn't say Nosham are Chayev is as if he clearly says Nosham are Potu. Because generally, women don't have a mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah. They don't have a mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah even by Dalet Parshiyas, Shkolim, Chodesh, Poro. So if Nosham would be Chayev in Kriyas HaTorah, Parsha Zohar, the Poskim should have said that. The two, the Shulchan Aruch, Mogen Avraham, Taz, all the Noisei Kailim, all the Poskim. So every posik that does not say Nosham Ar Chayev is as if he clearly says Nosham Ar Poto, and therefore Miyikar Adin Nosham Ar Poto. My late wife, Zechron Lavrocha, my daughters, never went to shul to hear Parsha Zohar. Why not? Do I have a reason not to? Yes, I do have a reason not to. I have a disagreement with Reb Shlomo Zalman, Zecher Tzadik Lavrocha. So Reb Shlomo Zalman argued that if you skip a word in Parsha Zohar, you're still Yoitza. If you listen, then you heard Ikaru Inyan. And he wants to prove so from the Magen Avraham, because the Magen Avraham says you yoitza either with kiseitze or with bishalach. Good enough. So according to Magen Avraham, ikar uinyan doesn't necessarily need to be parshas kiseitze. I disagree. Some time ago I said a shiur on Hallel, and I want to make something fundamentally clear. It's a big yesod. There's a difference between kriyos and brochos. Every mitzvah that's kriya, whatever you need to read the text and not skip one word. You skipped one word, you weren't yoitza, and you need to say it again. And that is relevant to kriyas shema, mikra mikurim, vidui maises, mikra megillah, even if it's a rabbonin. You skipped one word, you need to read the entire megillah again with a bracha. Because every mitzvah of kriya necessitates mitchilo v'ad soif. You skipped one word, you weren't yoitza. Broches only amishana memadbeya shetova chachamim bebrochas layotza, and that is ve'ikar siyam habrocha ve'ikar uinyan, and that is relevant to berches hamazon, to berches haTorah, to all the berches of tefillah of the Shmoyne Esrei. That is the fundamental difference. And because, according to the Shulchan Aruch, Tosfos and the Rosh, the mitzvah of Schiras Masei Amalek is kriyas parsha. You need to read the entire parsha. You skip one word, you are not yoitza. What about the Magen Avraham? I think this is a mistake in the understanding of the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham says in the Torah we find two parshiyos of Amalek. You could be yoitza with either, but you need to read the entire parsha, either kiseitze or bishalach. But it's clear. If you skipped one word, you're not yoitz. And therefore, I know in my shul and other shuls in Yerushalayim, hundreds of women come. Many of them come with babies. It's almost impossible from the Eses Noshim to hear every word. And therefore, you're not yoitz. Preferable, stay at home and read Parsha Zohar from a Chumash, because in my opinion, the vast majority of poskim, almost all the poskim agree that Noshim don't have a chiyuv to listen to Parsha Zohar in shul. This is a big sugya, and Yosem Amasho Onarti Lefnechem Kosov Kan. But we did discuss the fundamentals of Kriyas, Parsha Zohar, and Schiras Masei Amalek. So this week is Shabbos Zohar, and we read Parsha Zohar. There are two parshiyos of Masei Amalek, Kitetze and Bishalach. And in each of these two parshiyos, Rashi writes a beautiful mashal. Parshas Kitetze, the famous mashal of the Ambatya Roitachas. There was a pool, and it was boiling water. Nobody could even put his foot in. And then one giver comes. He jumps into the pool, with a huge splash. He screams from pain. It's boiling hot. But he cooled off that pool with his body temperature. And after him, all the others joined. When Klal Yisrael came out of Mitzrayim, and the entire world saw the miracles, Kriyas Yamsuf, and the devastation of Paro and his mighty army, nobody dared to intimidate Israel. Amalek was the first one to try to destroy Klal Yisrael. And after him came all the others. So this mushal demonstrates and emphasizes the evil Amalek, the brutality, the cruelty. And that is why Kodesh Baruch Hu promises, Ki mocha em chazechel Amalek metachas hashamayim. But on Bishalach there's another mushal. Tinoik sheroichev al kispei Abba. Father carrying his child on his shoulders. And the boy sitting on his father's shoulder sees father than his father does. They're walking in the street, and the little boy tells his father, Abba, look right, you see a candy store? Buy me some candy. And the father does. 5 minutes later, the boy tells his father, Abba, look to your left, you see a toy store? Buy me a little train. And his father does. And they walk on. Person they know comes the other way, and the boy asks that man, Haro iso es Abba, did you see my father? I don't know where he is. And his father says, young boy sitting up there, what a mechutzef you are. How do you dare to ask where I am? Who bought you candy? who bought you that little train. You're asking me for presents, and I'm giving you whatever you request, and you dare to ask, where is my father? I'm going to throw you off my shoulders, and let's see what happens. And a dog comes and bites him. Klal saw in Midbar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sustained them. They asked for man, they got man. They were hungry, they got slav. The water was bitter, they got be'er shel Miriam. And then they asked, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu em ayin? Chayechem shanimash lecheschem v'bo ha'kelev v'noishech. Amalek was that dog, and he bit, and he hurt, and he fought Israel. Second mashal demonstrates how bad Amalek is. First mashal demonstrates and emphasizes our responsibility. Amalek is the worst of them all. But if we would be tzaddikim gemurim, there would be no Amalek. It is only because we asked Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu. Vayovei Amalek v'yelocha b'misul b'rafidem chazal pshat Masechet Sanhedrin. It says Masechet Sanhedrin b'rafidem sherofi yedeyim et divrei Torah. And that is a lesson. Whenever we suffer, whenever we know pain, we always need to make our own cheshbon nefesh, even if there is whom to blame, and it's justified to spread blame. Amalek was Amalek, but still, the Ambatya is Moshel number 2. Moshel number 1 is, where did we go astray? Where do we take responsibility? We bear responsibility for Amalek. Gittin Daf Nun Ches, Chazal tell a story b'Yamei Chur ben Abayis. They come and tell Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya, there's a child, a Jewish boy, in the Roman dungeon. Yefei Einayim, v'tov ro'i, v'kifzotav sdurot lo taltalim. He has beautiful payas, beautiful Yiddish payas. And Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya says, I want to go visit, I need to see that boy. And he sees him, and his heart is broken, and he asks, Mino sana meshiso Yankov Yisor lo boizes. And the boy responds, Aloizeh Hashem chotonu lo, v'loi ovu b'derochov haloich, v'loi shamu b'koiloi. Rabbi Yeshua is moved, and he says, Muftechani b'zeh she'eh moireh roa b'Yisrael. And he swears, Ein izaz mikan ad she'evdene b'kol hamomen she'b'yodem. He spent a fortune, and he got that boy out. And ultimately, he was a great Tana, Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. And the question is, what inspired Rabbi Shmuel? Where did he see that spark of genius to make him confident that this boy will be a leader in Klal Yisrael? The boy quoted a pasuk. He ended the pasuk that Rabbi Shua started. It's a pasuk in Novi Yeshayahu. Minosana Meshisu Yankov. But let's analyze the pasuk. The boy says, Haloizeh Hashem chotonu loi v'loi ovu b'drochav aloich v'loi shamu b'koiloi. Interesting formula. Haloizeh Hashem chatonu lo, we sinned, we transgressed. V'loi ovu b'drochav aloich, they didn't go in his ways. V'loi shamu b'koiloi, and they didn't listen to his words. Starting with us, going over to them. Either the pasuk should say, or to the contrary, no, there is whom to blame. Malchus Roimi Harisha, the brutal, cruel Roimi. There is whom to blame. Maybe the Biryanim that burnt, reduced to ashes, or the grain that they saved for the siege to feed the people, the Biryanim that went against the Yochanan and Zakkai the Godlador. There was whom to blame. And that boy, torn from his father and mother, rotting in a dungeon, in a Roman jail, has the courage to say, Zeh Hashem chotonu lo. We are the ones to blame. And only then does he have the right to point fingers. V'lo yovu. That is greatness. So my dear friends, the war is still raging in Ukraine, and the world is at danger, and thousands upon thousands of Jews were uprooted from their homes destroyed. their livelihoods destroyed, wounded, shattered, broken, navenad. We're all one people, and we all need to daven for them. And when Jews suffer, greatness demands. We always need to ask before pointing fingers. Yes, it's Putin, it's the Russians, but before we tell the mashal of the ambatya, of the boiling water, mashal number one is Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu ayin, the child sitting on his father's shoulders. So everybody needs to do tshuva, everybody needs to try to be better, learn more, daven better, give more tzedakah, and let us so, Kadosh Baruch Yerachim, al pleitus she'eretz Yisrael. We should only hear b'seides tevis, and in these days of simcha, v'nahafechu she'yishtretu ha'yehudim heimel b'seineim, we should hear b'seides tevis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be mesameach our hearts. Purim Sameach, good Shabbos to everyone, and we should b'kora b'yameinu zoichu to be as Mashiach tzidkenu b'mheru v'yameinu.